There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 18th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello.
Pandemic profiteering. Baroness Mone admitted that she failed to reveal her links to a company that supplied PPE to the NHS during the pandemic, and she's set to receive £60 million.
It's the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
Really, can't you? We'll tell you. The Rwanda roadblock. Airlines are the latest now causing problems. They're refusing to sign contracts to take part in the asylum policy because they think it could cause them reputational damage. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, has more.
If airlines won't take migrants to Rwanda, how will they get there? A new problem for Sunak's Rwanda plan. More soon.
Starmer's prescription. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has challenged the Prime Minister to put politics aside and put patients before nom-doms to save the health service.
And war on woke. Esther McVey, the Minister for Common Sense, declares war on waste and wokery that she says is plaguing the public sector.
XL bully deadline. There are less than 2 weeks now until Rishi Sunak's ban comes into force. Breeding, selling and rehoming them will become illegal in England and Wales. Well, this show is nothing without you. We do love to hear from you, don't we? gbviews@gbnews.com on any of the stories that we're talking about today. But first, let's get the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. £1.5 billion of funding is being put into government grant schemes to help keep households warm. It's part of the £6 billion package for energy efficiency measures that were announced in last year's autumn statement. It's after the success of the £7,500 uplift to heat pump grants. The funding covers a 3-year period from 2025 to 2028. A new £400 million energy efficiency grant will also go to households to fund bigger radiators and better insulation. 2 people were taken to hospital after a gas explosion at a home in Blackburn. Police were called to alerts of an incident at 8 o'clock last night. Video footage showed the walls and the roof of a house crumbling around a passerby. He was taken to hospital with minor injuries, along with a second man who also suffered minor injuries. Lancashire Police say nearby homes had been evacuated and they've urged people to avoid the area while investigations continue. Owners of XL bully dogs have 2 weeks to make sure their pets are legal. From December the 31st, they must be muzzled in public and it'll be illegal to breed, sell or abandon them in England and Wales. Owners have also been told they can ask a vet to put their pets down and claim compensation. The full ban on the breed comes into force on February the 1st next year, but owners can apply for an exemption to keep their dogs. And the festive getaway begins today with 21 million UK car journeys expected to be made between now and Christmas Eve. The RAC says just over 2 million trips will be made on Thursday and just over 3 million on Friday. Around 13.5 million car journeys are expected between Friday and December 24th. That's up 20% from the same time last year. During the weekend before Christmas, between midday and 2 p.m. is expected to be the busiest time to travel on the roads, with drivers being warned to travel before or after peak times to avoid gridlock traffic. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Andrew and Ellie.
Well, it was a car crash interview, frankly. Baroness Mone admitted she lied over her involvement in PPE deals worth millions during the pandemic.
Yes, the company MedPro was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million to supply personal protective equipment, or PPE, after she recommended it to the government.
So, speaking on BBC's Sunday with Laura Koonsberg programme, she admitted she's a beneficiary of her husband Doug Barrowman's financial trusts, which holds £60 million of profit from the deal. And by the way, the PPE was defective as well. So let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Michelle, it does feel like the truth has had to be dragged out here.
Not really, Laura, because the only thing I'd say to you is the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
Andrew, what do you make of that?
She thinks it's OK to lie to the press. When the press ask questions of people in public life, they're asking it on behalf of people watching programmes like this, reading newspapers, listening to the radio. And she does have a case to answer because she lied and lied and lied for nearly 3 years about the extent of her financial involvement. She's saying, it's my husband's company. Come on, pull the other one, love. And it's a trust in the Isle of Man, which benefits, of course it is, because that's very tax effective. She did not tell the truth in the House of Lords. Every member of the House of Lords has to declare their financial interests. It's not as transparent as it ought to be, but nothing there. Her excuse for that, well, everybody knew, didn't they? No, we didn't.
Well, I finished watching that interview and I actually had more questions than answers, including who is advising her? And who is advising her to say the line that she went along with, which was, the only thing I've ever done wrong is lie to the press. And as you say, Andrew, if you lie to the press, you're actually lying to the people.
And it was the press that exposed this scandal in the first place. I tell you who I think was advising her, whoever advised Prince Andrew to do that car crash interview with Emily Maitlis over the £12 million he gave to a girl apparently he's never met.
Well, there were similarities being drawn to that interview over the weekend. Well, joining us in the studio now is Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Very good to see you this morning. What did you make of this interview?
I mean, it's absolutely baffling, isn't it? Because if you genuinely thought you'd done nothing wrong, you wouldn't have lied to the press about it for several years, right? It's one of those, like, unsolvable PR problems. It's that you cannot explain why, if you genuinely thought you were innocent, you behaved the way you did, right? And that's notwithstanding the quality of the material or anything else. It's just baffling. And as you say, it wasn't just lying to the press. It was also her House of Lords register of interests. Now, as every member of Parliament has to declare their financial interests so that we, the public, can know whether they're profiting from their office. Now, as you say, it's not a perfect system, but people have been caught out by it, and it is generally pretty good. And the irony is that actually, if you are honest about things, the British public are often very tolerant of this, right? There are lots of very rich members of the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and no one really minds because if they're doing their job properly. But if you're doing something like this, it's guaranteed to cause outrage.
Is this going to cause any difficulties for Michael Gove? Because we now know Michael Gove, the Cabinet Ombudsman, he was part of the Quad, 4 ministers involved in all the big decisions during the pandemic. She used the fast track available to parliamentarians to contact him. She's got his phone number to say, look, why don't you use this company for PPE, and he then put them in touch, this company in touch with the civil service. The civil service did the appointed the company. Gove had nothing to do with the appointment of Baroness Mone's company, but Labour is obviously trying to cause problems for Gove.
I don't really think all that much can be pinned on Gove.
No.
If you think about where we were during the pandemic, absolute panic. The public rightly expected the government to do everything it could to get hold of PPE. And the civil service were the ones who were supposed to do the due diligence, right? All that Michael Gove appears to have done is said, I've heard about this company, look into it. I think on a fair-minded analysis, that's not Michael Gove's fault. The question is, why wasn't the due diligence done? You know, if this turned out to be a very expensive way of buying defective PPE, how did that happen?
The timing of this is very interesting, isn't it, Henry? I mean, as you say, the truth hasn't been told for 3 years. Why now and why in this manner?
Well, it's been, as you say, dragged out by the press, hasn't it? The way that these things always do. Also, the COVID inquiry has made sure that all of this is back front and centre again. I think maybe they might have thought maybe we've ridden it out, right? Like we're sort of past the pandemic, everything's unlocked. But actually, what we're seeing in the COVID inquiry is really digging down into the details of how all of these decisions were made in the pandemic about buying PPE and all the rest of it. And that has renewed press interest, which means we do still care about this because...
And people care about this as well, don't they, Henry? I mean, people are so angry at the wastage, the money and the corruption that was seen during that time.
Absolutely. And also, if you think about it, the fact that this PPE turned out to be defective, potentially, that's lives put on the line, right? Right at the time when the NHS was right up against it and we needed everything we could, every pound spent on defective PPE was also defective PPE that potentially went to the front line and let people down.
Henry, stay with us. Some airlines now, the latest blow to the government's beleaguered Rwanda scheme, they're saying they won't sign contracts to take part in the asylum policy because they fear it could damage their reputation. Chris Hope is our political editor who's got the latest. Chris, every day Rishi Sunak opens his eyes in the morning, another problem on Rwanda.
Yeah, I mean, this one is less of a serious one, I think. The government has its own planes. It's got a Royal Air Force that has all sorts of chartered planes that take ministers, the Prime Minister, elsewhere. I've been on the planes for GBNews off to COP28 and the G20. But it shows that there's concern about these commercial airlines taking individuals who arrive here illegally by small boat back to Rwanda, back to Kigali. I think in the old days, certainly British Airways used to fly there. Whether they're one of the airlines, we don't know. But certainly airlines appear to be saying there could be some reputational damage if we take part in this. And this may calm down. If this scheme gets up and running, it becomes part of the routine of Whitehall. And how these planes is not a big issue. I think initially one can imagine them chartering planes and taking them off that way. There'll be lots of opposition, people trying to block the runways if they ever get that far. But I'm sure as it goes on, the issue of reputational issue will slow down and not be a big issue. But right now, yes, there are no airlines volunteering to take people arriving here to Rwanda. But that will change eventually, I imagine. But another problem, another headache, Andrew and Ellie, that the government doesn't need.
Absolutely. I mean, you talk there about chartering planes, but there's also some reports this morning that the military defence or the RAF may need to get involved in order to get people on these flights and actually get them off the ground, which adds to the ever-increasing cost. And then there's also talk of security and high-level security, because there will be, we can expect, a number of protesters when these flights do eventually take off.
That's right, but we do see in polling, don't we, and GBNews covers this issue extensively, the importance of getting these flights off the ground. And I think the PM is seeing that. He was at the weekend in a conference with Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Premier, and he said there's concerns about migration overwhelming parts of Europe and how enemies could use the surge in illegal migration to undermine democracies, UK and others. So there is a concern that people are arriving here, they're not being vetted, no one knows who they are. The PM was talking quite big language over the weekend in Italy. I should say there are no airlines saying they're concerned about this, by the way. We don't know if it's British Airways or whoever it might be, but the real concern the Home Office has got is that no one right now is volunteering to fly them there, and it's another problem he's got.
Finally, Chris, he's had some flack, the Prime Minister, for using the word overwhelming parts of Europe, the migrant problem. He's just merely stating the obvious, isn't he? There's huge problems in Italy in particular.
Well, that kind of language, Andrew, you and I remember back to Nigel Farage saying that in 2014. Overwhelming, this language is worrying to the kind of left, Twitter users and the rest, but many people in communities who do feel overwhelmed. He's recognising how people feel when they see their neighbourhoods change and they feel that there's no control over migration. That's what he's talking about, and I think it does show he's trying to understand why it's a big issue. Sadly, yet we didn't yet see any real attempt to stop it. The tens of thousands arriving here illegally, hundreds of thousands arriving legally. Forgive me, legally. Net migration is that number, but so far no real attempt to stop it, and time is running out on this government.
OK, Christopher Hope for us in our Westminster studio. Thank you very much indeed. And the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, is still with us. What do you make of this, Henry? Do you think planes to Rwanda will ever take off? We're talking now, some of the papers reporting this morning, earliest we're looking at now is May, and then we're getting into election territory, aren't we?
We are getting into election territory. I mean, personally, I don't think the Rwanda bill is going to happen, right? Because there's not time to force it through the House of Lords. If the House of Lords insist on a load of amendments the government won't accept, it will fall on something called double insistence in March, right? And then we won't have a Rwanda bill at all. But if we did, this is surmountable. You hire a commercial like a cargo airline or something that doesn't have exposure to the public, and you take them off from an RAF base which doesn't have public access, which makes it harder for protesters. That's doable. But the broader question of is the Rwanda scheme ever going to happen? Like, the government tried what it thought was a better judged legal approach. It lost in the Supreme Court. It's now trying to pass a bill without time to get it through. Even if you did get it through, you then have legal challenges which would have to come through. So personally, I don't think we're going to see a Rwanda scheme this side of the election.
This whole plan, apart from to get people back and as the deterrent, of course, Rwanda was a deterrent, that was the plan, but it was also politically, Rishi Sunak thought he was going to score one over the Labour Party by the Tories having a proper policy which they would unite around, the Rwanda plan. Labour have no real policy as an alternative, but in fact, it's completely unravelled because he can't get the Tory party to back it.
Yeah, the Rwanda scheme really is focusing on issues which I think are going to divide the Conservative Party and indeed British politics for the next 10 to 15 years. You know, immigration, the practical extent of our international commitments, the ECHR and the need to maybe renegotiate some of that. These are really important issues. But the government's done no pitch rolling. It's not like Brexit, where you had years of work and campaigning and building up. It's just trying to do it at the end of a government, and it hasn't created a consensus even within the Conservative Party about what to do. It's true, Labour doesn't have an answer, right? Labour's answer is clear the backlog, but the only way you can reliably clear the backlog is basically if you let everyone in, because one of the big things that holds up the backlog is the trouble deporting people. So Labour doesn't have a policy, but the Tories aren't getting the credit that they might for that because their policy isn't working. The other big problem for Rishi Sunak is that he's trying to run an election on being tough on immigration, right? But legal immigration, net legal immigration, has tripled since 2010. 257,000 in 2010, that was a record. 745,000 last year. So he can't mention legal immigration, which means he's stuck on Rwanda.
And we have to remember, it's 1.2 million actually came in. When you take out the people who leave, it comes down to 745,000. But 1.2 million people coming in from abroad every year. It's a major city.
It is, and we don't build anything like enough. Like you know,
no houses,
I talk about housing every time I come on the channel, I think, but we build 250 to 280,000 homes a year. New starts are down, and at the same time, we import 750,000 people. Now, that means more and more people competing for that's why we have a rent crisis and everything else. It's unsustainable.
Right.
Henry Hill, thank you very much.
Now, Keir Starmer today urged the Prime Minister to put politics aside and put patients before non-doms to fix the NHS.
Yes, the call comes as health service backlogs continue to grow. That's despite the PM's pledge to cut waiting lists in January. Well, here to explain Labour's NHS plan is former Labour MP Simon Danshuk. Very good to see you this morning, Simon. Talk us a little bit through this plan.
Well, what they're proposing to do, and it's the brainchild here, is Wes Streeting, and he's proposing to get rid of the backlog by encouraging and enabling local health authorities to work over the weekend. It seems like a no-brainer to me. There's over half of hospitals don't actually close their operating theatres over the weekend. And what we need to do is sweat the asset. I mean, it's quite an obvious solution to a significant problem. So get operating theatres working over the weekend, use money from getting rid of non-dom status to fund that in the NHS, and get the NHS carrying out more operations on a Saturday and a Sunday. I think it's a great idea, actually.
Simon, it's a great idea, but if it's so straightforward, why hasn't it been done before? Because who says these doctors and surgeons are going to agree to work at the weekends? You can't make them. The government say they'll pay them overtime, but when did you last see a GP surgery open on a Saturday? It's a new mindset in the NHS.
Yeah, I think we have. Oh, without a doubt, we need radical reform within the NHS, and I think the person to do it is Wes Streeting, the shadow health secretary. I think he's already been around the world looking at other solutions. He was in Singapore recently, looking at what some of the solutions could be for the United Kingdom. And Labour probably are the party to reform the NHS. The Conservatives always get stuck on trying to reform the NHS. They're sort of seen as the bogeyman when it comes to the NHS. So Labour could do that. If they get into power at the general election, then Wes Streeting, who's one of the smarter members of the shadow cabinet, I have to say, and if he's enabled to do it, if Keir Starmer allows him to reform the NHS, then we could eventually see some change. And I do think that needs to involve increasing productivity. It needs to involve the private sector much more. We have to have a radical overhaul.
I mean, it is going to have to be root and branch reform, isn't it, Simon? Because quite frankly, I mean, just look at the backlog and also the cost. I mean, Wes Streeting himself would say the NHS is going to go bankrupt if it doesn't reform.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been honest about that. That's why I think Wes Streeting is the person to do it. He said that the funding for the NHS is unsustainable. He says that the NHS used the winter crisis to try and get more money out of government. He's speaking the truth on many of these matters. Rishi Sunak, as one of his 5 pledges, has said he'll get waiting times down. That's not really occurred. I think it's gone from 7.7 million a year waiting to from 7.8 million. That's not much change. So we do need a radical overhaul.
I agree with you, but I suspect there are some of your former colleagues on the Labour benches, Simon, who will throw their hands up in horror at the mere idea of more private sector involvement. Of course, Labour, it's much easier for Labour to do it than the Tories, but he could encounter, Keir Starmer, a lot of opposition on his own side, particularly if he doesn't have a huge majority.
Oh, I agree with you. There are people within the Parliamentary Labour Party who will not have truck with any involvement in the private sector. The problem Labour has is that Keir Starmer is no Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting knows how to connect with the public. He speaks the honest language that's required. He knows how to define a woman, which Keir struggles with. So perhaps in many respects we'd be better off with Wes Streeting as leader, but that's not what we've got at the moment.
OK, Simon Danshuk, former Labour MP, very good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Henry, can they do it? I mean, weekend working, getting operating theatres working weekend, if it's so obvious, why haven't they done it before?
Well, because it's expensive, right. And you need to negotiate with the, you need to negotiate with the trade unions.
Yeah.
Which we have historically been quite bad at doing.
Yeah.
But expensive is the main one. You know, if you go from a 5-day NHS to a 7-day NHS, you're logically increasing the cost of the NHS by 40%, right?
Yeah.
At a time when the budget is extremely stretched. So where are they going to find the money? I mean, the non-dom thing, it won't raise enough money. They've spent that money several times. Yeah, precisely. It's frankly, it doesn't raise all that much money. It will potentially drive high net worth individuals out of the UK. But setting that aside, they talk about root and branch reform. It's really easy to talk about root and branch reform in the abstract, right? Everyone agrees that the NHS needs, but what? Like, what is the actual reform that you want to do? The current system is propped up by, the truth is, the current system is propped up by private care. It is propped up by more and more people having health insurance for which they get no tax deductions or anything else. That money that they spend in the private healthcare system doesn't cross-subsidise NHS services. It goes into a private ecosystem that props up shareholders. And the highest level of, the UK now has a high level of incidental spending by the poorest people, crowdfunding for healthcare, as you see in the United States. That was from a Financial Times report last year. So, fine, if you want to do a root and branch reform of the NHS, that involves middle-class people paying for more of it. And no one's going to touch that.
Nobody wants to pay more taxes. They always say they do, but they tend to vote for parties which won't put up your taxes.
Well, I don't think it is taxes. I think that's the issue. Taxation is already at a historic high. I think if you look at European systems, how do you, which all have higher investment than the NHS, how do you do it? You get people to pay for their own care. Because people, to an extent, if they can, because people tend to be more willing to part with their own money for their own care than they are to just hand stuff over to the taxman. And if you did that, then the tax money, you could concentrate on those who need it most. But is Labour, I mean, Labour is the party that could do Nixon's China on the NHS if it really wanted to, but is the Labour Party actually going to do that? I don't think so.
No, I agree with you. I think, no, absolutely not.
Henry Hill, thank you very
thanks for
much
coming in.
indeed. Do let us know what you think about that. What do you think of Labour's plan on fixing the NHS? gbviews@gbnews.com. But do stay with us. Still to come, did you catch that interview with Baroness Mone at the weekend? Do you think she did anything wrong after she stands to benefit around £60 million from a PPE contract? Let us know.
PPE that didn't work. Just keep reminding people that.
Yeah, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We do have a relatively unsettled week of weather ahead of us, and that is starting with these fronts that are sprawled across great swathes of the UK. So we do have some outbreaks of rain to contend with, particularly for western areas throughout today. Then the rain will be slightly lighter and patchier further towards the east, even some early brightness for southeast England, but the cloud will be thickening here into the afternoon. A blustery, breezy day for England and Wales, but the winds will be easing out for Northern Ireland and Scotland as we start to see some sunshine poking its way through later on, though a few heavy showers with some hail maybe in the far northwest later. Temperatures slightly above average for the time of year, generally ranging between 10 and 13 degrees Celsius. That clearer slot of weather will push its way into parts of northern England as we head into this evening, but we'll see the cloud build once again as this area of rain moves its way in from the southwest, covering in a lot of England and Wales overnight. Some clearer spells and some showers moving into Scotland and Northern Ireland, so it'll be a cooler night here, 3 to 6 degrees Celsius, but milder further towards the south and west. And it will be a very wet start to Tuesday for England and Wales. Quite a tricky travelling conditions first thing, but the rain will eventually clear its way off into the day, and we'll see sunnier spells pushing in from the northwest. Still with a scattering of showers, those could be wintry over the higher ground of Scotland, and you'll see those fresher northwesterlies bringing in that cooler conditions for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, but still holding on to the mild conditions for the southwest. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Still to come, Common Sense Minister Estimate Very, former of this parish, has declared war on the woke. She's had enough of waste and wokery in the public sector. Isn't it about time too? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on Monday the 18th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Ellie Costello.
Pandemic profiteering? I should say so. Baroness Mone admits she failed to reveal her links to a company that supplied PPE to the NHS. They're going to make around £60 million profit.
It's the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
Rwanda roadblock. Airlines are reportedly refusing to sign contracts to take part in the asylum policy over reputational damage. Our political editor Christopher Hope has more.
If commercial flights won't take off with people to Rwanda, how will migrants get there? The PM's new problems.
And Starmer's prescription. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has challenged the Prime Minister to put politics aside and put patients for non-DOMs to save the health service.
Weighing down the NHS, hospital admissions linked to obesity have doubled in 6 years. That's more than 3,000 admissions a day.
And Christmas drink warning. There are growing concerns about alcoholism during the festive season, so we ask just how much is too much?
People struggle with their drinking, they struggle with their relationships, they struggle with their mental health far more than they would at any other time of the year.
I felt the lowest of the low. I felt like, why don't my life just end? Why don't it just stop? Why don't the pain just stop?
Well, do let us know your thoughts on any of our talking points today. We do love to hear from you. The email address is gbnews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much and good morning. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Michael Gove's facing pressure after Baroness Mone admitted she'll benefit from a deal between the government and a PPE firm. Lady Mone admitted she failed to reveal her links to a company that supplied PPE gowns to the NHS. MedPro is currently being investigated by the National Crime Agency. Lady Mone told the BBC she made an error by not revealing her links to the company, which led to her receiving around £60 million. Ministers say she shouldn't return to the House of Lords. £1.5 billion of funding is being put into government grant schemes to help keep households warm. It's part of the £6 billion package for energy efficiency measures that were announced in last year's autumn statement. It's after the success of the £7,500 uplift to heat pump grants. The funding covers a 3-year period from 2025 to 2028. A new £400 million energy efficiency grant will also go to households to fund bigger radiators and better insulation. Energy Efficiency Minister Lord Callanan told GB News the scheme will help with the rising energy costs.
The reason that we're seeing such massive spikes in prices is because our own supplies of oil and gas from the North Sea are declining. We're having to import more and more. And you saw the massive price spike last winter caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So we need to reduce our usage of imported, expensive fossil fuels and alongside our climate commitments. All of that points towards increased electrification.
2 people were taken to hospital after a gas explosion at a home in Blackburn. Police were called to alerts of an incident at 8 o'clock last night. Video footage showed the walls and the roof of a house crumbling around a passerby. He was taken to hospital with minor injuries, along with a second man who also suffered minor injuries. Lancashire police say nearby homes had been evacuated and they urge people to avoid the area while investigations continue. The Foreign Secretary is calling for the release of media tycoon and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai as his landmark national security case begins. The 76-year-old British citizen is charged with colluding with foreign forces to endanger national security. He faces a possible life sentence if convicted under a law imposed by China following the 2019 pro-democracy protests. Lord Cameron has condemned the charges against Mr. Lai, urging Chinese authorities to end the politically motivated prosecution. London's public transport system will receive £250 million worth of government support next year. Transport for London will use the investment for projects such as providing new tube trains for the Piccadilly line. TfL is not allowed to spend the money on its day-to-day operations. The rail minister said the investment will have an impact for not just people in the capital, but also the millions who visit every year. Owners of XL bullies have 2 weeks to make sure their dogs are legal. From December the 31st, they must be muzzled in public and it'll be illegal to breed, sell or abandon them in England and Wales. Owners have also been told they can ask a vet to put their pets down and claim compensation. The full ban on the breed comes into force on the 1st of February next year, but owners can apply for an exemption to keep their dogs. And the festive getaway begins today with 21 million UK car journeys expected to be made between now and Christmas Eve. The RAC says just over 2 million trips will be made on Thursday and 3.2 million on Friday. Around 13.5 million car journeys are expected between Friday and December the 24th. That's up 20% from the same time last year. During the weekend before Christmas, between midday and 2 p.m. is expected to be the busiest time to travel on the roads, with drivers being warned to travel before or after peak times to avoid gridlock traffic. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now back to Andrew and Ellie.
Well, let's see what you've been saying at home. A lot of you are very aerated, as my mother would say if she was still with us, about Baroness Mone. Jim says, strip her of her title, retrieve the profits, put the money back in the public purse.
And Dan says, regarding Michelle Mone, why is no one asking the question? Why is she being paid for equipment that was defective? Surely she was contracted to provide equipment that was fit for use. It wasn't fit for use and therefore didn't fulfil the contract. I don't understand how she can get away with this.
Well, they are trying to get 120 million back. But it might not be proved so easy. And, of course, they did take a 60 million profit out of this deal, which is now in her husband's a trust fund in the Isle of Man, which I think is a tax haven.
And the National Crime Agency are looking at this at the moment. So there could be a lot more to come on this story. So do keep those views coming in on that. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Now, let's get up to date with the latest problems for Rwanda. Airlines are apparently refusing to sign contracts to take part in this asylum policy because they fear it could damage their reputation. Chris Hope is our political editor in Westminster.
Yes, Andrew, yet more problems for this policy, which the PM is putting so much stall on and trying to make this happen, taking migrants off from the UK, arriving illegally in small boats back to Rwanda. We now hear that commercial airlines are not volunteering to sign up for this. The government now is looking to try and hire an agent to try and find some carrier who will take part in this work. The worry they've got is that on social media there might be critics who will try and point their finger at this company and try and damage his business elsewhere, and that's the problem. The government's also trying to see which airfield to take off from. They're looking at Boscombe Down, it seems, in Wiltshire, but that requires a lot more fencing around it to stop protesters trying to stop flights taking off. This will be a battle, even if we get to the point where it gets legal and can happen through the Commons and House of Lords by maybe April or May, then the battle will be, will flights be allowed to take off? This policy is popular out there, away from Twitter, away from people who are concerned about it, maybe on the left of politics in this country. People want to see action to try and tackle the small boat arrivals. It's illegal numbers. It's worrying the PM. The PM said it in a conference this weekend, a right-wing conference with Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Premier. He made very clear he's worried about numbers taking off. He said it could overwhelm parts of Europe and that our enemies could use this to undermine democracies. The problem, of course, is if you allow people to arrive here legally and don't check their paperwork properly, or if they may not have paperwork, who is arriving, who is coming here, and that's the worry he's got, and it's a worry shared by other countries in Italy, for example, and that's why the UK is finding common cause with Italy at the moment on this issue.
But we are seeing setback after setback after setback, aren't we, Christopher Hope? And each of these setbacks just adds to this overwhelming cost of the Rwanda plan. I mean, we're talking now about potentially having to look at MOD planes or the RAF getting involved in order to get people on flights to Rwanda. And you touched upon there the huge security issue when it comes to erecting barriers to try and keep protesters out.
Yeah, I think the government will want to go ahead with it, though. They are trying to demonstrate they get the issue of migration, why legal or illegal migration needs to be controlled. It hasn't been. We heard earlier from Henry Hill about the issue of house building. Where will everyone live if they come here this way? It's not fair on people who are here, who are waiting for housing, who are waiting in line for various hospital appointments and medical treatments. If you allow people to arrive here to jump the queue almost, that's the concern. There's no question that the PM is trying to show us with this speech the weekend in Italy, he understands the issue of migration and why it's so concerning for communities. But can he push ahead and get it? What the big issue, as Henry Hill was saying, is Rwanda even going to work? No one knows. The political risk is it doesn't work, and then we're into an election period when the government will say, well, our big idea hasn't worked, and perhaps people might think it's Labour's turn to have a go.
The clock is ticking. Christopher Hope there for us in our Westminster studio. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, the other great, huge story today is Baroness Mone. Joining us in the studio to talk about this is Piers Pottinger. He's the founder of Europe's biggest PR firm, Bell Pottinger. Piers, you've advised Tory Prime Ministers. I know you've advised quite a few members of the House of Lords too. Where would you start with Baroness Mone after that absolute car crash interview?
Well, I don't think anyone could advise her when she admits she's a liar.
Yeah.
It's interesting, her husband's called Barrow Man, and I would say he looks more like a Barrow boy.
Yeah.
And seems to have behaved like it. I mean, that ridiculous interview with Laura Kuenssberg was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, on the one hand, she says, I lied, But she says, I didn't wish to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. I mean, it's extraordinary. And once you lie to the press, you're finished with the press.
Yeah.
Why should they ever believe you again? And on top of that, her lawyers lied to the press. They wrote letters to at least The Guardian, I think all the papers, saying she was categorically not involved. Now, if you're advising a client, you have to trust them.
Yeah.
How do the lawyers trust her? Because she obviously lied to them, or they were lying as well, in which case that's a breach of legal practice. So there's something very wrong here, and I think the YouTube documentary, which is even more farcical, I actually thought it was a Steve Coogan spoof.
I know.
It's absolutely preposterous what she's doing, and if I was a judge or a member of a jury, she's at the moment facing a criminal and civil prosecution. In either case, I would have thought that would prejudice what she's done. Actually, it hasn't helped. It's made things worse for her. I think it's extraordinary. I know her type, a rather ruthless, determined, impatient entrepreneur. And I think when she was given her peerage, I suspect it was a token gesture to the Scots, because they didn't have, I think, in that honours list many other Scots, and they thought, oh gosh, we better give it to someone. Here's a Scottish lady entrepreneur, perfect. But I mean, look at this mess. It's shocking. And also the profiteering at the time of one of Britain's biggest crises.
60 million.
Any way you look at this, it's disgraceful. And to say she was protecting her family, I'm sorry, I don't see how anyone can believe that. It's absolutely... She's trying to defend the indefensible.
What do you think she was trying to achieve from that interview? Because she admits to lying, but she says she hasn't done anything wrong and she doesn't think she's got a case to answer for it. It looked as though, to me, she wanted people to feel sorry for her, to feel sorry for her family and the press intrusion, and it's totally backfired.
It's protecting my family stuff. I'm sorry, it really doesn't wash. And it's a bit like Nicola Sturgeon, also facing potential court action, who keeps saying, I've done nothing wrong. I mean, they seem to... People in those kind of positions, it seems to be the vogue to say, oh, I lied, that's perfectly all right, and I've done nothing wrong. Sorry.
But also admitting that, sorry...
No, I was going to say, she said that it's not a crime to lie to the press, but when she's lying to the press, she's lying to everybody.
Of course she is. And she's lying. I mean, it is never a good idea to lie, because once you start lying, you've got to continue lying to keep the lie alive, as it were. And I always used to advise my clients who sometimes wanted to lie, please don't do that, because it doesn't work. And also, if a client ever lied to me, I'd immediately resign their business. And I would imagine that Michelle Mone's lawyers now must be thinking about that.
Yeah, I can't remember who they are, but I mean, I don't suppose they're cheap.
No.
And I like you, and I saw, because they were threatening some newspapers with defamation proceedings,
Yes,
which are
and
hugely expensive.
they've sent letters signed by themselves declaring that their client has no involvement, and therefore they must have believed it. Now, if they knew she was lying, I mean, my goodness me, who's ever going to take that firm? It's the firm of lawyers' reputation on the line here, just as it is Michelle Mone and the Barrow Boy.
Okay.
Right, stay with us, Piers.
Thank you very much. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has urged the Prime Minister to put politics aside and put patients before non-doms to fix the NHS.
This comes as health service backlogs continue to grow despite the Prime Minister's one of his 5 pledges, which was to cut waiting lists by January.
Well, here to explain Labour's NHS plan is media commentator and former Sunday Mirror editor Paul Cagnew. Very good to see you this morning, Paul, and talk us through these plans from Labour.
Well, it's quite a sizable document I've got here, Labour's mission on the NHS. And looking back at Michelle Mone, it's not a good day for the government on the NHS front, because that fits it again into what went wrong with the NHS during the pandemic under this government. So it's going to be interesting. But Labour are trying to get across a policy, almost a cross-party agreement. I don't quite think that's going to work. But in West Streeting, they have one of the more innovative politicians around, young, dynamic, and willing to, if you like, think out of the box while still remaining committed to a free NHS.
And Paul, do you think, I mean, leaving aside, we know there won't be a cross-party consensus on this, but it's pretty basic stuff they're saying, get operating theatres working on a Saturday and Sunday. If it was that straightforward, why has it never been done before? Answer, presumably, the huge cost. And are Labour then prepared to say where that money's going to come from? Because they've spent that non-DOMS policy quite a few times already.
Well, there are a handful of NHS trusts that have recently started doing weekend surgery, for example, and quite successfully. And in Labour's paper, in their document, they want to step up on that, along with their ambition is to have 7,500 more medical school places, 10,000 more NHS nurses, 7,000 more district nurses. And it's worth noting, which a lot of people don't realise, that we have one of the lowest per capita doctors, in Europe. In fact, sort of 3 docs per 1,000 in our case. In fact, and even Greece has 6 per 1,000, and we have a heavier reliance on overseas medical staff than virtually any other major European economy.
Paul, do you think we even have a workforce that is willing or even capable of working 7 days a week? I mean, we've been plagued by strike action in the NHS, and we're always hearing how overworked and understaffed these wards are. So do we even have the capacity to make it a 7-day service?
That is the challenge. Although I'm an admirer of West Streeting, I think there are a few things that he hasn't really managed to explain, and one of those is certainly how it fits in with Labour also wanting to reduce legal migration. Obviously, we're all against illegal migration and trying to stop the boats. But we do need legal migrants in the health service, and Labour's plan is a 10-year plan. And frankly, the way the polls are going, that they would probably have a majority that would probably almost guarantee them a 10-year tenure. So it's not like they want to wave a magic wand and suddenly everything's going to be right overnight. But the targets are ambitious, but they are important targets.
All right, that's Paul Connew. Thanks so much for joining us. Piers Pottinger's still with us. Piers, Boris Johnson romped into Downing Street with a majority of 80. I know they were blown off course by the pandemic, but with a majority of that large, they perhaps could have taken some radical steps about the NHS?
Yes, but the trouble is all governments seem to shy away from doing the really big things they need to do with the NHS. And this Labour plan is really pathetic. They are doing scans, and as Paul has said, already quite a few NHSs are doing operations at the weekend. So there's nothing new in the Labour plan. Also, this pie-in-the-sky idea, you can whisk up 7,000 new doctors, 10,000 new nurses.
Where are they
coming from?
And how do you pay for it, of course?
Well, exactly. How will we pay for it? I mean, throwing more and more money at the NHS is not a solution. And also always to blame Rishi Sunak for things that actually the chief executive of the NHS should be sorting out. The medical people in the NHS do a wonderful job, but 48% of the employees are management, bureaucracy and non-medical. And surely that's an area you could really look at and fine-tune. I think also Labour have almost accepted but dare not admit that there needs to be a public-private partnership to make the NHS work properly.
Will they have the courage to do that?
I don't think so, because it's such a very, very sort of tinderbox moment for the extreme left, and Starmer is still terrified of the extreme left.
And if he doesn't have a huge majority?
No, and incidentally, with the problem with Rwanda and the planes, I mean, I actually think that you should look at sending them to Rwanda by boat, which is their favoured method of transport, the illegal immigrants.
Hadn't thought that.
No, well, it's a nice sea journey. It's a long cruise.
And you get quite a lot more in the boats.
Yeah, the Bibby Stockholm could go.
OK, Piers Portinger,
He means
thank
that
you very
seriously
much
too.
this morning. Now, up next, the Foreign Secretary, Lord David Cameron, has warned too many civilians have been killed in Gaza and expressed public support for a sustainable ceasefire. We're talking about that next. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:25 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello in for Bev Turner.
Yes, now, the language towards the war between Israel and Hamas seems to be changing.
Yeah, well, the Foreign Secretary David Cameron has warned too many civilians have been killed in Gaza and expressed public support for a sustainable ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the US are pushing Israel to move towards small-scale raids. But does the war still have support among Israelis?
Well, we're joined in the studio by broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Andrew, there's a definite change in language. The Foreign Secretary writing a joint article with the German Foreign Secretary saying a sustainable ceasefire. Ceasefire doesn't mean a temporary pause in hostilities to allow humanitarian aid. A ceasefire means so you can start negotiating. Well, Israel are not going to negotiate with Hamas, and Hamas will not negotiate with Israel because they're a terrorist organisation that doesn't believe in a two-state solution, and they are determined to wipe Israel off the map.
No, absolutely right. And as you say, the language has changed. It's sort of turning around and saying, OK, look, we recognise Israel's got the right to defend itself and it's a terrorist attack, and language about that. But the key to it, and it's always about language, isn't it? It's about the difficulty the BBC had declaring them to be a terrorist organisation. And it's a prescribed one. And by law, what happens is it's an offence if you support a prescribed terrorist organisation. There are penalties appropriately. When they're talking about, the key word in this is sustainable ceasefire, because what they're saying is not a ceasefire for a day or for a month or for... It's got to work for years. So they need to work on that sort of premise to drive forward that sort of narrative. But certainly I think it is absolutely a change. Biden's also come out on that sort of principle. And what's going to happen, I think, the spotlight will then shine on Netanyahu, who's got all sorts of questions to answer at the moment. And a lot of people, there's that movie about Wag the Dog, and you sort of turn around, if you remember that, and look in that sort of thing. And I think over the next few days, that pressure is going to increase, and I think Netanyahu will be very worried.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, the Defence Secretary, this is something that caught our eye this morning, didn't it? Ben Wallace, writing in the Daily Telegraph, obviously had been the former Defence Secretary for the past 4 years. He's pointing a finger at Mr Netanyahu and saying that he believes these tactics, if they were to continue, is going to fuel the conflict for another 50 years. And he also talks about the actions radicalising a whole new generation of Muslims around the globe.
And that's absolutely right. If ever you're going to garner support, it's seeing these horrendous images that we're bombarded with every single day about children being murdered and so on and so forth, and civilian casualties. Any civilian casualty is absolutely appalling. But what's happened is I live right in the heart of London, where we have the biggest possible community of everybody. We have the Israeli embassy over there. We have, obviously, there's the biggest mosque. We have the BBC just around the corner. And we see every single day, they used to get on, a community was fantastic. You then have all these marches. And what's happened is the poison that you have in social media has spilled out onto the streets. And I think the more that you have these dramatic images of that sort of side, it's going to be appalling.
But interesting that Ben Wallace pulls back from calling for a ceasefire. So it's a very nuanced article, but he says, I'm not calling for a ceasefire because of what we've discussed. Hamas are not content. They want to wipe Israel off the map. But he said what Israel must not do is destroy large parts of Gaza in its drive to destroy Hamas. Are the two things compatible?
Well, I think they are, because there was a cartoon, I think, when the conflict first started, and people were talking about a ceasefire, and they had people saying cease, and a soldier saying cease, and behind them was a Hamas terrorist saying fire. On that sort of basis, because that's the concern. Their objective is to wipe out Hamas, to wipe out a terrorist organisation. But at the same time, we absolutely have to emphasise not all Palestinians are Hamas, obviously.
No, quite.
And you need to look at that. But it's horrendous on a human scale. Well, as I was reading here, 85% of Gaza's population of 2.3 million homes, basically they've gone 85% from their homes. And you look at this destruction, and I think the trouble with these images is we get sensitised sometimes, don't you? And you sort of turn around and say, well, we've seen too much and therefore we don't really realise it. It's not until you personify it. And I talk about, the lot of disinformation which is out there as well. And it's always about the first casualty in war is the truth.
Right.
And so whilst there are some horrendous images, there are also some which have been, my pet subject about AI, there's some which have been AI generated, just to trigger those heartstrings, pull those heartstrings to make it even more. So the whole manipulation of what's going on is really important. But at the end of the day, the human tragedy is appalling, and we do need to look at that. But lots of questions. But the language is so important. So sustained ceasefire, which is what they want.
And Ben Wallace is saying that the level of the conflict, the level of the killings of Palestinians is a great recruiting sergeant for Hamas.
Oh, absolutely. If you turn around and say, these are the people who murdered your children, you're going to absolutely... That sort of division that we have at the moment of divided age is going to get much more... And that will go on for generations. You look at that sort of tragedy. And what happened over the last few days, the murder of the Israelis, and we call it murder, they accidentally shot as they were coming up with their white flag, and they were shirtless to prove they didn't have anything on them. And to
killed
get
by their
shot,
own side.
You're losing both sides on that sort of basis. So the pressure is absolutely on to find this ceasefire, but a sustainable one, as they say in the language, not days, not months, but years.
Absolutely, very difficult indeed. Andrew Ewan, very good to see you this morning. Thank you very much. Now, still to come, XL bully deadline. Just 2 weeks to go until Rishi Sunak's ban comes into force. The breeding, selling and rehoming of XL bullies will become illegal in England and Wales.
That and much more after your morning news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you. 10:31. This is the latest. A COVID contract which will see a former Tory peer benefit from a £60 million profit is putting new pressure on the government. Baroness Mone told the BBC she made an error in publicly denying her links to firm MedPro, which secured a £200 million deal to supply personal protection equipment during the pandemic. She says she contacted Michael Gove, who was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster at the time, because massive quantities of PPE was needed. The Labour Party says he now has questions to answer and Lady Mone should not be allowed to return to the House of Lords. Conservative MP Miriam Cates is being investigated by Parliament's standards watchdog. The Penston and Stocksbridge MPs facing claims that she caused significant damage to the reputation of the House. It's unknown what the investigation relates to. She's one of 8 MPs currently being investigated by the Standards Commissioner. £1.5 billion of funding is being put into government grant schemes to help keep households warm. It's part of the £6 billion package for energy efficiency measures that were announced in last year's autumn statement. It's after the success of the £7,500 uplift to heat pump grants. The funding covers a 3-year period from 2025 to 2028. Owners of XL bullies have 2 weeks to make sure their dogs are legal. From December the 31st, they must be muzzled in public and it'll be illegal to breed, sell or abandon them in England and Wales. Owners have also been told they can ask a vet to put their pets down and claim compensation. The full ban on the breed comes into force on the 1st of February next year, but owners can apply for an exemption to keep their dogs. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2672 and €1.1607. The price of gold, £1,596.42 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,603 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thanks, Tatiana. Now, as we enter Christmas party season, research suggests half of Brits think the UK has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Would you agree with that? We'll debate that next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It is 10:38. If only you knew what we were talking about just before the break.
That was close.
You're on Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Ellie Costello.
Yes, very good morning to you. Now, the charity Drink Aware says more than half of Brits think the country has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but only 1 in 10 drinkers think that they have a problem.
Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been investigating our relationship with the bottle this Christmas.
Alcohol took everything from Lee. His job, his family, and eventually his home.
So we're outside Tesco, and this is the spot I used to sit and beg.
He spent 9 months living on the streets of Nottingham. In the day, he'd drink 9 cans of strong lager.
I didn't want to live. I didn't want to be here. I felt the lowest of the low. I felt like, why don't my life just end? Why don't it just stop? Why don't the pain just stop?
More than 500,000 Brits are addicted to alcohol, but millions more drink in a harmful way. At Christmas, booze is everywhere.
The average Brit drinks about 18 units of alcohol in a week, but at Christmas time, that jumps massively to at least 14 units on Christmas Day alone.
A unit of alcohol can be half a pint of beer, a small glass of wine, or a single measure of spirit. DrinkAware found that half of Brits think the UK has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and that 2/3 overindulge at Christmas.
I tend to drink maybe a little bit more at Christmas.
I think most people basically drink to excess.
I tend to have a little bit of a Baileys at Christmas. I think it's quite of a festive thing.
The Nottingham Recovery Network helps anyone struggling with drink or drugs. The charity framework runs the service with council funding.
How is the new programme going?
Apollos is the Director for Health and Social Care.
Alcohol problems and drug problems don't happen on their own. They're usually a symptom of other things going on. So that might be debt, mental health, relationship, housing. We've brought services together to be able to meet the whole of that need.
He says there's a spike in people with drinking problems around Christmas.
People struggle with their drinking, they struggle with their relationships, they struggle with their mental health far more than they would at any other time of the year.
We get to live again.
Asking for help is how many people start to fix a drinking problem. When Lee asked, the network got him off the streets and into recovery. He's been sober for 3 years now and supports others recovering too.
I'm no longer just existing, I'm actually living life.
Alcohol is a part of Christmas, and that won't change. It becomes a problem when it takes over the celebration. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, we're very pleased to be joined by author and journalist Emma Wolfe and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Easton.
Who's a right boozer?
What do you make of it, Dawn?
Good. Hello. Good morning.
Quite an intro.
Morning.
Yes. I think, look, this is an incredibly difficult time of year, isn't it, for people that are struggling with both drink and indeed eating disorders as well.
Yeah.
Everyone overdoes things at Christmas, and it's a very fine line between actually being aware of what you're drinking and drinking too much. But I think, you know, that's a very emotional, moving report, and it is a struggle. It is a struggle. I mean, you know, there's people in my own family who struggle with alcohol, and they're on that verge of slipping into not being able to control it. And this time of year, because there's alcohol all over the place, wherever you go,
I know.
it's everywhere. I mean, you walk in and, you know, into a TV studio at breakfast time, and it's would you like a glass of champagne? It's Christmas. It's like, yes, of course. But it's something we all need to be aware of.
Yeah.
But there is Drink Aware, by the way, on their website, and they have a really, really good website and a Twitter feed, and they've got lots of tips and advice on there about how you can control your drinking if you're worried about it.
No, it's really, really good point.
That's so true, and it's funny about alcohol because it's everywhere, and it's such a powerful drug, and it can cause, taken to excess, drinking to excess can cause terrible, you know, family breakdown and, you know, depression and very, very serious illness. But it's also a completely normal part of society. Like you say, especially at Christmas. And most people can just enjoy a couple of drinks, maybe overdo it sometimes, and they're fine. Some people can't, and we don't know really if it's genetic or what, but, you know, one drink will send them spiralling over the edge. So it's such a tricky... I haven't had a drink for about 3 or 4 years, really only because I've got a little one. And that's not a moral thing at all. I do feel better for it, but I also know that a glass of wine is a lovely thing to have, or a little sherry or something. So it's a lovely little in moderation, but moderation's really hard for everybody.
Does your have a drink at Christmas?
I'm single.
Oh, yeah, cool.
So my little one, my 3-year-old doesn't drink yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Not
yet, but we'll probably both hit the bottle quite soon.
But there are such wider benefits, aren't there, to not drinking? Not that I can relate. I do like a drink at the weekend. But the issues that stem from it, it's not just that sore head in the morning, but it often comes that anxiety, doesn't it?
What did I do? What did I say? Was I a bit out of control? All of that that
you wouldn't factor into drinking.
I'm incredibly lucky I don't get hangovers, but that's probably because I don't, thank you, Andrew, drink that much, contrary to some people's popular belief. But I do remember when I was on a holiday with George Best, who obviously, as we all know, had a serious alcohol problem.
That was a good name drop.
That was a good name drop.
On
holiday with George Best.
I was actually on honeymoon with George Best.
Yeah.
And we were sitting on a beach in Mauritius watching the sunrise together. I wasn't marrying him, by the way. His wife was there too. But we were having a cup of tea. It was watching sunrise. And he poured himself a large brandy. And when you see someone at that level of addiction, and, you know, it's the most stunning, beautiful scene, and you were watching the sunrise over the ocean.
So what time is this?
Pardon?
What time of the day is he pouring this brandy?
Sunrise.
Gosh.
It was morning. It was first thing in the morning. It was breakfast time. We'd literally all just woken up. We were sitting there in this amazing place going, oh, my God, this is so stunning, so wonderful. And George couldn't appreciate it because all he was concerned about was getting a drink. And it was brandy at that stage. It's so incredibly sad.
Yeah, cycling to the studio this morning, I saw a chap sort of on the edge of the street holding a bottle of red. This must be like 9 in the morning, and I thought, that's when it's not fun anymore. You know, everybody likes a glass of red wine, especially
the
this time of year.
husband said to say
when you're... But when you're holding a bottle of red wine at 9 o'clock in the morning, you know, you're in a pretty desperate state because you just need it to get, even to get normal.
Yeah, it's very, very
sad.
Well, this segues into what we're going to talk about next.
Yes.
Ellie and I were both struck by this front page story in the Times. 3,000 water emissions a day linked to obesity, 20 of them, at least, children.
But are you surprised or are you not?
No.
Because are we ignoring the obesity crisis or are we not? We talk about COVID as the big health crisis. No, obesity in this country is the huge health crisis. Obesity is entirely preventable and it leads to heart attack, stroke, diabetes, depression, everything, all the other. It's the second most preventable form of cancer in this country. And do you want the cost? You know, £98 billion a year cost to the UK, 19 billion cost to the NHS. The NHS is already broken and struggling and on its knees and all the cliches. And yet, we have this huge weight problem and we are not talking about it. And as for children, you know, if you are overweight or obese as a young child, what chance do you have?
Isn't it 30% of primary age children have weight issues now, are heavier than they should be? And I remember going back to when I was a kid, back in the dark ages, Andrew, you were there too. I mean, you know, children who were overweight were incredibly rare.
Incredibly rare.
They were, and I can still remember the ones in my school because of the names we called them, because there was only a handful of them and we were
even when I was young, and of course that was, you know, only 10 years ago, even when I was at school, it was everybody was skinny, everyone was running around, and then there was the occasional fat kid who had a grandma that fed him too many treats or whatever. But yeah, people were made fun of. Now it is actually normal, and that's because we live in such an obesogenic society, snacks everywhere. You can't just have 3 meals a day. You've got to constantly be feeding your children another smoothie, another rice cake, another... Why?
But also...
In France, they let children eat and then they get hungry in between. And understanding between hunger and fullness it's not a crime for your child to be hungry and ready for the next meal.
The problem you're going to have with this conversation, though, is as soon as you even start talking about obesity sensibly as a health issue we all need to tackle, you get the issue of fat shaming.
Of course.
Talk about someone's weight, you are fat shaming. I mean, I deliberately don't even use the word fat now for that very reason.
No, but that's part of the reason that doctors are we're all terrified of using the word fat, which is just adipose body tissue. That's what fat is. Same, but I've had skinny shaming for years, so it's okay to kind of, you know, shame. I do get that, but until we can be realistic about it as a health issue, not as an appearance issue or about body diversity or body glorification or body positivity, until we can talk about obesity as an actual health issue, we're not going to get anywhere.
No, and we have to.
But you and I, Dawn, could, the times we've written a story, had this discussion about, and the takeaways that are right by schools, and nothing ever changes. No. Local planners are going to stop the fast food stores.
Deliveries, endless junk food.
Parents driving the kids to school when they should walk or get on the bike.
Yeah, I must admit, I can be a bit of a body fascist. I mean, I like my sport, I always have done. I've been very lucky in that way. But I will, you know, you go to the average supermarket and there are aisles and aisles of stuff that nobody really needs to eat. And then you see little kids who are stuffing their faces with fast food. And then you hear the excuse, it's like, well, you know, there is a socio-economic factor at play here. We can't afford to eat healthily.
Yeah, because it is the poor... Luton is the fat capital of England, apparently.
And poorer people are... It's double the amount. In this report, it's double the amount of poorer people being admitted to hospital. Yeah, we have to admit that as well. But I mean...
cheaper processed food.
But it's a perfect storm, isn't it? We're not moving as much. Everyone's stuck behind their phones, hunched in their bedrooms, whereas when we were little, we were running around outside, we were. And cars, all of that, and deliveries and processed food, and it's just a perfect storm. And we're heading the way that America has been.
Emma, how do we fix this?
Get moving, eat real food. I mean, where do we even start? Learn to cook.
Vegetables.
But also stop the constant snacking. Don't treat the whole world like it's an airport and that all you do is go from cafe to restaurant.
That's a really important point, what you just said there, Andrew. It is actually now, it's actually going back to the basics. I mean, I'm a fine one to talk because I really am rubbish in the kitchen, but learning about nutrition, learning how to prepare meals, learning what is good for you and what isn't. And it's not going to the fast food joint. It might, on the surface, be cheaper, but it's not. I mean, you can prepare healthy meals, but we need to educate you.
When I was a young reporter, I was living in all these horrible bedsits in my first days as a young reporter, and I had a great book bought for me by my uncle and auntie, How to Cook in a Bedsit.
Yes!
It was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that at uni.
One hot plate or two hot plates maximum.
You know.
So you had to be creative. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of processed food, and that's when I learnt to cook.
Yeah. Maybe we should do it more in schools. Do let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.com. Dawn, there's a story in the Telegraph today about Miss France. It's being accused of wokery. Tell us about it.
I love this story.
I just can't get my head around this story. My hair is long compared to what it has been my entire life, right? I don't do hair. I'm the world's worst girl. So hair and me are not friends. But this is a story in France. Miss France, there's been a storm over the latest Miss France because she has short hair. And evidently, beauty queens are meant to have luscious, long, flowing locks, as beautifully demonstrated by the very beautiful Ellie here. But, you know, Ellie's hair is her choice, Emma's is hers, mine's mine, and Andrew, I'm not saying anything about yours, but... I mean,
yours is beautiful.
It is gorgeous.
Darling.
No, but it's like, it's ridiculous. we're 2023 and a woman can't have short hair.
I know.
They're accusing the fact that she's been crowned Miss France for woke reasons.
I don't understand
She's got short hair.
And she's gorgeous.
And she is gorgeous.
She's gorgeous.
Beautiful.
And also, some people can carry off short hair and some people can't.
Yeah, and she's got a lovely little delicate face, and I think when you do have a little delicate face... She's elfin, and the pixie cut really suits her. I couldn't have a haircut like that. But...
They're saying it's not feminine. Hello, Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it reminds me of.
So
beautiful
true.
Little elfin short hair.
Yeah.
Stunning.
Yeah.
We're in 2023. Women should be able to wear their hair whatever way they like.
But also, I just get angry because I want to live my life. The reason my hair is tied up today is because I said I was on the bike, I cycled in, right? I don't want to have to spend... We were talking about this beforehand, Dawn. I don't want to spend 12 hours a week in a beauty salon. I don't. That's everybody's choice. But I'm not going to waste my life getting fake nails done and getting fake hair done. I'm not.
Well, we couldn't live our lives with fake nails. We'd be hopeless.
I couldn't even
cycle everywhere.
Exactly.
Changing a tyre with sort of...
I think it's fascinating that they still have these beauty competitions. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I can't... Do we still have Miss England? Is it a big event here? I wouldn't know.
We do still have it.
The difference with the French one was that they actually make them... Well, they make them. I'm sure the women are willing. But that they actually have sort of like the skimpy costume section as well.
They?
So it's like we don't do the swimwear thing here as well.
Do we not?
They were all wearing matching gold. So they all look stunning, but little skimpy outfits as well. So I don't think... I must admit, you know, as a feminist, it made me go, not entirely sure, but she's gorgeous. She's got great hair.
No, she's beautiful, and congratulations to her. Emma, let's have a look at The Independent, shall we? And it's the big story of today, Michelle Mone and that interview.
She's in a very interesting position, as are her lawyers as well, isn't she? Because it's sort of... I was made a scapegoat. I've never lied. I didn't pull the wool over anyone's eyes, but I did lie, actually. Oh, I was protecting my... Like, she's saying 10 different... Well, yeah, no, I said the wrong thing.
It's OK to lie to the press,
It's OK to lie to the press, but I was protecting my family, and I'm being made a scapegoat. And this kind of... I think... Get your story straight and then stick to it.
It's like, you know, remember Prince Andrew's car crashing?
It's the same one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Same
advisor.
advisor.
Comes up and goes, that's nothing. Hold my champagne. Let me have a go at this one. It was just like... Oh,
and you could
just don't say anything.
It was at times. I was just incredulous. So why are you doing this, my dear?
That, Andrew? Why are you doing this?
Because every time you open your mouth, you are drilling another nail into the coffin.
Yeah, Laura Kuenssberg's face is like, oh my God, this is gold.
But also, in a more serious level, she's admitting to basically using the pandemic to get rich quick, isn't she? That's what Wes Streeting was saying. Get rich quick. And Wes Streeting from Labour is saying, you got rich quick and we want our money back.
And you wouldn't mind, but the flipping PPE was defective.
I know. All she had to do at the beginning was saying, yes, we were linked to this company. Yes, because obviously we all needed PPE.
And there was a panic at the time.
We were
panicking, yes.
So we supplied the government. We thought we were doing the right thing. It turned out to be defective. We apologise for that. All she had to do was to just be honest.
Yeah, and said she lied, and she's still lying.
And this woman is in the House of Lords. That's, you know, that's the kind of...
She's on a break at the moment, isn't she?
On a break. But she's a baroness. That's what we are honouring in our system.
The last time a Lord was chucked out of the House of Lords was 1918 for being unpatriotic, thinking they were too close to the German army during the First World War.
Gosh, I thought it was more recent that someone was stripped.
Do let us know what you think. Should Baroness Mone be chucked out of the House of Lords? Let us know after this.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We do have a relatively unsettled week of weather ahead of us, and that is starting with these fronts that are sprawled across great swathes of the UK. So we do have some outbreaks of rain to contend with, particularly for western areas throughout today. Then the rain will be slightly lighter and patchier further towards the east, even some early brightness for southeast England, but the cloud will be thickening here into the afternoon. A blustery, breezy day for England and Wales, but the winds will be easing out for Northern Ireland and Scotland as we start to see some sunshine poking its way through later on, though a few heavy showers with some hail maybe in the far northwest later. Temperatures slightly above average for the time of year, generally ranging between 10 and 13 degrees Celsius. That clearer slot of weather will push its way into parts of northern England as we head into this evening, but we'll see the cloud build once again as this area of rain moves its way in from the southwest, covering in a lot of England and Wales overnight. Some clearer spells and some showers moving into Scotland and Northern Ireland, so it'll be a cooler night here, 3 to 6 degrees Celsius, but milder further towards the south and west. And it will be a very wet start to Tuesday for England and Wales. Quite a tricky travelling conditions first thing, but the rain will eventually clear its way off into the day, and we'll see sunnier spells pushing in from the northwest. Still with a scattering of showers, those could be wintry over the higher ground of Scotland, and you'll see those fresher northwesterlies bringing in that cooler conditions for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, but still holding on to the mild conditions for the southwest. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Still to come, the Common Sense Minister, Esther McVey, formerly of this parish, declares war on the woke public sector. It's a big war, that is. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 18th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Ellie Costello.
Pandemic profiteering. Baroness Mone admitted that she failed to reveal her links to a company that supplied PPE to the NHS during the pandemic, but she's set to receive £60 million profit.
is the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
Really? We can. Starmer's prescription. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has challenged the Prime Minister to put politics aside and put patients before non-doms to save the health service.
Weighing down the NHS, hospital admissions linked to obesity have doubled in the past 6 years. More than 3,000 people are admitted every single day.
And time up for XL bullies. There are less than 2 weeks until Rishi Sunak's ban comes into force. Breeding, selling and rehoming will become illegal in England and Wales.
Well, do let us know your thoughts on any of the stories that we are talking about today, but especially that interview with Baroness Mone.
Do you think when she looks back at it, she thinks, job well done or absolute disaster?
I don't know, the mind baffles, doesn't it? Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ellie, thank you very much. 1 minute past 11. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. A COVID contract which will see a former Tory peer benefit from a £60 million profit is putting new pressure on the government. Baroness Mone told the BBC she made an error in publicly denying her links to firm MedPro, which secured a £200 million deal to supply personal protection equipment during the pandemic. She says she contacted Michael Gove, who was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster at the time, because massive quantities of PPE was needed. Labour says he now has questions to answer and Lady Mone should not be allowed to return to the House of Lords. Conservative MP Miriam Cates is being investigated by Parliament's standards watchdog. The member for Penistone and Stocksbridge is accused of causing significant damage to the reputation of the House. It's not clear what the claims relate to. She's one of 8 MPs currently being investigated by the Standards Commissioner. £1.5 billion of funding is being put into government grant schemes to help keep households warm. It's part of the £6 billion energy efficiency package announced during the autumn statement. It's after the success of the £7,500 uplift to heat pump grants. The funding covers a 3-year period from 2025 to 2028. A new £400 million energy efficiency grant will also go to households to fund bigger radiators and better insulation. Energy Efficiency Minister Lord Callanan told GB News the scheme will help with the rising energy costs.
The reason that we're seeing such massive spikes in prices is because our own supplies of oil and gas from the North Sea are declining. We're having to import more and more. And you saw the massive price spike last winter caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So we need to reduce our usage of imported, expensive fossil fuels and alongside our climate commitments. All of that points towards increased electrification.
2 people are in hospital after a gas explosion at a home in Blackburn. The incident happened just before 8 o'clock last night, with emergency services responding to calls that a building had collapsed. CCTV caught the moment of the blast. 2 people reportedly suffered minor injuries. Lancashire Police says nearby homes have been evacuated. It's urging people to avoid the area while investigations continue. The Foreign Secretary is calling for the release of media tycoon and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai as his landmark national security case begins. The 76-year-old British citizen's charged with colluding with foreign forces to endanger national security. He faces a possible life sentence if convicted under a law imposed by China following the 2019 pro-democracy protests. Lord Cameron has condemned the charges against Mr Lai, urging Chinese authorities to end the politically motivated prosecution. London's public transport system will receive £250 million worth of government support next year. Transport for London will use the investment for projects such as providing new tube trains for the Piccadilly line. TfL is not allowed to spend the money on its day-to-day operations. The rail minister says the investment will have an impact for not just people in the capital, but also the millions who visit every year. Owners of XL bullies have 2 weeks to make sure their dogs are legal. From December the 31st, they must be muzzled in public and it'll be illegal to breed, sell or abandon them in England and Wales. Owners have also been told they can ask a vet to put their pets down and claim compensation. The full ban on the breed comes into force on February 1st next year, but owners can apply for an exemption to keep their dogs. And the festive getaway begins today with 21 million UK car journeys expected to be made between now and Christmas Eve. The RAC says just over 2 million trips will be made on Thursday and just over 3 million on Friday. Around 13.5 million car journeys are expected between Friday and December the 24th. That's up 20% from the same time last year. Over the coming weekend, between midday and 2 p.m. is expected to be the busiest time to travel on the roads, with drivers being warned to travel before or after peak times to avoid gridlock traffic. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now back to Andrew and Ellie.
Well, let's see what we've been saying at home. A lot of you talking about the NHS and Labour's plans to get more people working in the NHS at weekends. Ray says, please note, most major hospitals rent out their theatres and staff to private health providers at weekends. They won't want to lose their bit on the side.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Very good point, Ray. Ken says, quite simply, the NHS should be privatised immediately.
Good luck with that, Ken. Nobody's going to win a general election with that policy. Let me tell you, it is the closest we've got to a national religion.
Yeah, well, it's very, very true. Steve says, why should weekend working be any more expensive? If they're given enough notice, they should alter their rotas and shift patterns to include weekend work as part of their normal working week. They've done it in all other walks of work.
And lots of emails still coming in about Baroness Mone.
Of course, yes. Rob says, why are we even considering letting anyone keep any money from PPE that didn't work? If you buy anything that proves to be faulty at purchase, you get your money back.
Very good point. Well, delighted to say joining us in the studio is Sean Bailey, who's a colleague of Baroness Mone's in the House of Lords. Now, she's taken leave of absence, but she's still a fully fledged member of the House of Lords, Sean. She tried to tell us in the interview yesterday she didn't need to declare any of her money in the House of Lords register because everybody knew. Complete rubbish.
There's two things. A fully fledged member of the House of Lords would be someone who attended and voted, in my mind. She hasn't been doing that. Look, we have quite a strict set of rules. We have people who can advise you on these things, and you sit down and they'll tell you exactly what you should do in any given situation. So her or anybody else shouldn't have too much confusion. With the benefit of hindsight, she would have known that she should do something. But the biggest problem she'll have, I imagine, is a minister. So if any ministers are implicated in this, their first thing they will say is, well, I wasn't informed. And she should have informed that minister who she sat in front of, because, of course, she's exposed, whichever minister, he or she, to massive amounts of danger in a very disingenuous way. So I think that is a problem she could have coming along.
Do you think that she should be removed from the House of Lords?
Look, as a member of the House of Lords, it's not for me to say if she should be removed or not. We have a committee. I'm sure people in Parliament will rattle their sabres. But ultimately, what the government should be concentrating on is actually recovering some of the money.
Yeah.
Because the most egregious part of this is that the PPE didn't work.
Yeah.
And if you bought a pair of shoes and the heel snapped off, you'd take them back.
You would.
Yeah, so at this point, I actually think that's where the energy should be. I know in the press it would be great sport to hunt her down or whatever people want to do, but really the public should be more concerned about the huge sums of money spent on PPE that was ineffective.
Well, let's just remind ourselves with a little bit of a clip from this interview, Michelle Mone speaking to the BBC at the weekend.
Michelle, it does feel like the truth has had to be dragged out here.
Not really, Laura, because the only thing I'd say to you is the only error that I have made is say to the press that I wasn't involved. I don't honestly see there's a case to answer. I can't see what we've done wrong.
What do you make of that, Sean?
I mean, therein lies her problem. She cannot see what she's done wrong. I imagine there's a government lawyer right just now making extensive notes off the back of that interview who will quite happily tell her what she's done wrong. And the other piece as well is she has to look at the court of public opinion. The barrier, the fence the press have to jump is very low. People make up their minds very early on, and I'm sure they did. And the idea that she's protecting her family, actually she's failed horrifically by not telling the truth, by giving the press a hare to chase. She has now exposed herself to many, many months, possibly years of this, and her family as well.
But what of this extraordinary assertion? Well, I lied to the press, it's not a crime. Doesn't matter if I lied to the press. I was doing that to protect my family. If she hadn't got involved in this dodgy contract, there'd be no media exposure in the first place. But a couple of things, Sean. The press exposed this, that's the job. And secondly, if you lie to the press, whether you're lying to this TV station, people listen on the radio too, or to my newspaper, the Daily Mail, effectively you're lying to the British public.
There's no doubt that you're lying to the press and the British public. But, of course, there's a huge opinion mixed up in there. But the real thing she needs to understand about the press, if they sniff a lie, if they think there's a conspiracy, as they say, isn't the cock-up that the press are interested in, it's the conspiracy. And she will now feel the full weight of your paper, this channel and many more outlets around this because she's made herself interesting. And the most important thing she's done is the idea that she still doesn't think she has anything to answer for. I think that's where her biggest problem lay.
Do you think that this interview, or indeed perhaps her attitude in this interview, has made things worse for Baroness Mone?
100%. And either her lawyer's a complete lunatic or he or she said, don't do this. There's no way what she did has made the situation any better. If you're sat at home and you were neutral, you've just thought to yourself, well, you've just told me you lied to me. I was prepared to give you the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. You've lied to me. If you're someone who's against it, you said she's just confirmed that she's not someone that you probably would want to support. And ultimately, if this does land in court, if the government do drag her to court, they'll have an awful lot to say about how this deal came about in the first place. Yeah. And that's when she'll set any minister who thought he was doing his job against her. And that could be a problem.
Because because she's a member of the House of Lords, there was a fast track, so she could pick up the phone, get straight through to a minister. We know this minister in particular was Michael Gove, who was part of the quad of 4 ministers handling the whole pandemic. And she said, why don't you look at this company, because they could supply. Now, my understanding is Michael Gove passed that on then to the civil service, as you'd expect, and they're the ones who do the hiring and firing and deciding on contracts, not Michael Gove. But nevertheless, Michael Gove now will be under a huge pressure from the Labour Party. You can smell blood.
I don't think Michael Gove will be under any pressure. Because
I hope not, because he did his job.
Yeah, he would have looked at that and assumed that all the processes before it comes to him were in place. Yeah. The people who designed the VIP lane, they will get looked at, and someone will say to them, look, you need to be part of going back to Baroness Mone and finding out what actually went on. Unfortunately for Michael, he was just doing his job in a highly pressured environment where things had to be delivered very quickly. So I think he could sort of step back and say, look, there's a system here, and I responded to the system. But ultimately, the government, forget Baroness Mone for a minute, forget Michael Gove, forget everybody else, huge amounts of money spent on something that was very ineffective. Let's try to get some of that money back. The sort of celebrity end of this, the red top end of this will be, this is a public figure who suggested she had nothing to do with it, then said she has had something to do with it, then said she was protecting her family, who's failed to protect her family. And I give it in that very scattergun way, because that's where her problems lay. And should this end in court, her lawyer will rerun this interview for her 100 times and say, you should not have done this. And if her lawyer's watching and condone this, she needs to get a new lawyer.
Very good point.
Sean, whilst we've got you, wanted to ask you about Esther McVey, formerly of this parish, and her war on woke. What do you make of this?
First and foremost, Esther McVey is one of the stars of Parliament. Always have been. When I was in number 10, I begged and begged and begged for them to make her a minister because I just feel like she has a handle on what real people are thinking. And look, we talk about a war on woke, but it's ridiculous. We're in a place now where children can go to school and say they're a furry. You know, we're in a place where you can change your sex and as a male rapist end up in a female prison. Yeah. So we absolutely need a war on woke. And the ironic thing is, the people that we most need defending from is officialdom, it's governments, it's schools, it's departments of the civil service. So actually having a minister who's focused on these issues, I think could be the best thing that's happened to the country for a long time.
I think it is. And one of the things that hit me when I read her article in the Mail today, I couldn't believe it. These local authorities have been paying people to work from home, paying their heating bills at a cost of $450,000. Sorry, if you want to work from home, Pay your own heating bill, mate. Don't expect long-suffering council taxpayers to have to pay it.
But here's the problem, isn't it? We have a civil service that's determined to work from home, and so it's not as productive, not giving us the value that we paid for. And then we have a country that's very expensive to run. Many of the councils around this country are bankrupt. If you looked at what they were doing, you might have to ask yourself, is it any wonder? No council should be paying somebody's heating bills for working at home, because, you know, they wouldn't pay your travel into work.
No.
You know, all of these subsidies, but the real problem is they're becoming the norm, and that's what we need to push against.
Sean Bailey, Lord Bailey. What is your title, by the way?
I'm Lord Bailey of Paddington.
Oh, that's great, isn't it?
Yes.
Of this
I was
parish.
born in an old Paddington hospital.
Very nice, very nice.
Wonderful
You enjoying the Lords?
The Lords is a tremendous privilege and a challenge, and it's just an opportunity to do more work for the people of this country. I'm really enjoying it.
Good. Well, you're an asset to the Lords. You really are. Unlike Baroness Mone.
Well, let's go back to Baroness Mone, shall we now? A Conservative MP for Lincoln, Carl McCartney. Very good to see you this morning, Carl. I'm sure you caught the interview over the weekend. I lied about COVID deal, but I've done nothing wrong, were the words of Baroness Mone. What did you make of it?
I'm going to echo what Lord Bailey, Sean, as some of us know, has just said, and badly advised if she took that advice at all. And if an interview was a good thing to do, then she needs to get a different lawyer. Yeah, she's made some mistakes and she needs to come clean. Otherwise, as Sean's just been telling you and your viewers, the media, the press, are just going to keep hounding her. And it's not going to go away. And the sooner the government recoups some of that money, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
And are you uncomfortable, Carl? Because I certainly am, that they were able to make such a large profit at a time when the country's in the grip of the worst pandemic since Asian flu, in 1918 or something, and £200 million contract, they got £60 million. And then we find out that the PPE is defective anyway.
Huge sums of money, you're exactly right, Andrew, and it's, nobody's averse against people who make profit, but actually this was making vast amounts of money for not doing too much other than signing pieces of paper. And as Sean just said, there was, yes, the VIP lane. Yes, there was, contact with the then minister at the time, Michael Gove, who will have passed it on to the appropriate civil servants, who will then, presumably, have done their due diligence. Whether they've done that due diligence correctly, I'm not at liberty to say, because I wasn't obviously involved in that at all. If you like, I'm a lowly backbencher, and it's well above my pay grade. But you'd expect that somebody would have done proper due diligence. Yes, at the time, those in government and those in the civil service and those in charge of procurement were desperately looking for, PPE from various different sources, from where they could get what you'd hope would have been good quality PPE stuff. This doesn't seem to have been that. So, whatever contract was signed, you'd expect some clauses that were included in there that would have said, if it's not up to scratch, if it's not fit for purpose, then you'll be having it back and we'll have our money back. Thank you very much on behalf of the British taxpayer.
Well, Carl, as you say, these questions are now going to be asked, aren't they, of those in government, those in the procurement teams, and also we know that the National Crime Agency are looking into this. But in the meantime, how do you think this is going down in the court of public opinion? Because we heard, didn't we, from Baroness Mone and from her husband, they admitted they'd had a good return, they'd made £60 million worth in profit. They also spoke about the yacht, which they said this hadn't paid for their yacht, but we did see those pictures of that yacht in the middle of a very difficult time for lots of people, cost of living crisis, and also at the same time saying they've done nothing wrong, but they have lied to the British press. How do you think that's gone down with the British public?
Like the proverbial bucket of sick, I think it's gone down with the great British public and members of Parliament like myself, who perhaps live a little closer to reality than those who deal with those sums of money and expect that, making £60 million on a £200 million contract, if those are the correct figures, seems to be normal. I wouldn't say a normal day's work, because it doesn't seem like hard work to me, however long it took to get that contract. But it's not living in the world of reality, is it? So, they need to take a deep breath, and I think perhaps with the aid of whether it's new lawyers or better lawyers, and maybe some PR advisors, make sure that they pay back what they should pay back to the great British taxpayer, who ultimately is the one that suffered at this point in time. And yes, there's, as Sean was saying, there's lots of other issues swirling around that, but actually the government needs to certainly chase them and those involved in that contract in making sure that because the PPE wasn't fit for purpose, the British sees its money back.
Carl, we had you on a couple of weeks ago talking about your ludicrous local Labour council cancelling the Christmas market in Lincoln, one of the oldest and most successful in the country, and they cancelled it because they thought it would be too popular and too many people there. Is it still cancelled, or have you managed to knock some common sense into their head?
Well, we're trying to knock some common sense in them. We started a campaign, I think, as you know, and part of that process was me coming in to talk to you and talking to lots of other media as well. And I'm not the only one. Various different businesses, organisations across the city of Lincoln and actually across the county have joined our call to, basically get together and make sure that, this time next year, Lincoln does have a Christmas market. It is one of the oldest in the country, over 40 years worth. And actually, it was Labour councillors who went over to our twin city, Neustadt, over in Germany, that brought the idea back to Lincoln, 40 odd years ago. Lincoln suffered from not having a Christmas market this year. Fair play to those people who put various different things on, and to the county council who put on some good events inside the castle in the centre of Lincoln. But actually, Lincoln and the populace, if you like, my constituents, have been a little bit more than disappointed with the Labour City Council's decision, not just to cancel the Christmas market.
Oh, looks as though we're having a few technical issues there with Carl McCartney, but we got the idea, didn't we?
We just have to read a statement from the council. The council has said, we simply could not continue delivering an event that has been deemed significant risk to public safety. Ridiculous.
Well, that was Carl McCartney there, Conservative MP of Lincoln. Thank you very much for his time, and sorry about those technical issues there. Now, still to come, Britain's obesity crisis is costing us nearly £100 billion a year. Is it time to start treating it like smoking? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You know those dogs, those XL bully dogs. Well, the owners are being urged to make sure they're ready to comply with new restrictions which come into force at the end of this month.
Yes, the message comes with less than 2 weeks before the deadline for keeping bully dogs on a lead and muzzled when in public.
It will become illegal to breed them, sell, advertise, gift, exchange, abandon or let XL bully dogs stray from that date.
Well, we're joined now by dangerous dog trainer and expert in dog aggression, John Gardner. Very good to see you this morning, John. So, I mean, the clock is ticking, isn't it, for XL bullies and their owners. If you do own an XL bully, what needs to be done before the 31st of December?
So, before the 31st of December, you need to make sure that your dog is microchipped. You need to make sure that it's neutered, that it's muzzled when it goes out on a lead in public, that your garden has secure boundaries around it capable of containing your dog. And, you know, when you go out, it needs to be on a lead and under control.
John, what about those people who will argue, my dog isn't an XL bully dog?
Yeah.
Isn't that one of the problems with this sort of legislation?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to enforce it. Obviously, the government has drawn up a list of guidelines to identify what an XL bully is, but there are a lot of similarities between breeds, and the XL bully isn't registered by the Kennel Club, so there isn't an actual specific standard that you can follow apart from the one that's been given by the government at the moment.
Then doesn't that leave a loophole there where we could still see XL bully dogs in the country, and we're seeing videos on the screen now, and dogs attacking other dogs and humans?
Yeah, it's very difficult. We've got clients coming to us now whose dogs I wouldn't consider to be an XL bully, but they're concerned given certain similarities in how their dogs look. They're just really concerned that they're, look, if they are accosted in the street or whatever, that they're complying with the laws, even though their dog isn't an XL bully. So they're getting their dogs muzzle trained, they're getting them trained on a lead, etc. So yeah, it is causing a lot of concern, and we have a lot of clients that, as I say, aren't XL bully owners, but they might own a bully type dog, like a pocket bully, for example. And they feel like they're getting swept up in it.
John, I was going to ask you, what do you say to those people who say, don't blame the dog, the XL bully dog, blame the owner?
I think this is I think there are these attacks have come from a small minority of dogs and owners. I think they are interlinked. You know, this isn't my saying, this is an American trainer's saying, but it's very true. Some dogs can be owned by anyone. Some dogs can only be owned by certain people, and maybe those certain people have help with, from trainers like ourselves. And sadly, some dogs can't be owned by anyone. So, yeah, I think that kind of sums it up, really.
Mm.
And John, in your work, especially in the next few weeks, I imagine you're very, very busy with lots of XL bully owners. How are they feeling as these new rules come into place?
I think for the most part, they're devastated. The problem is, I think it's difficult to know how many XL bullies there are in the country. You know, it goes from 10,000 to 15,000. So if we split the difference and say 12,500 XL bullies in the country, and just over 4,000 at the moment have been registered for exemption, you know, that's less than half. But those 4,000 that have been registered for exemption have been registered by the kind of responsible, law-abiding dog owners. I don't think that the majority of those are the type of people whose dogs have caused these horrible attacks that have led to this ban. It's somewhere in the other 6,000 to 10,000 that these dogs and owners have come from. So, look, some of our clients have got some behavioural issues with their dogs, which we've worked on and helped them with. But for the most part, sadly, the dogs we're working with are really nice dogs. As I say, the ones that have caused the attacks, whilst they're horrific, they are in the minority of this breed.
All right.
Difficult issue, isn't it?
Very difficult. John, thank you so much. That's John Gardner, who's a dog expert and specialises in dog aggression. Thanks for that. And just to remind you, if you do have an XL bully, you've got to get all this done by December the 31st.
Yeah. Now, still to come, weighing down the NHS. Hospital admissions linked to obesity have doubled in 6 years. More than 3,000 people a day are admitted. That's more than smoking. That and much more after your morning news with Tatiana.
Ellie, thank you very much. 11:31. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says he takes the scandal surrounding Baroness Mone incredibly seriously. During a trip to Scotland, Rishi Sunak said he can't comment further because there's an ongoing investigation. A COVID contract which will see the former Tory peer benefit from a £60 million profit is putting new pressure on the government, with MPs calling for Michael Gove, who was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster at the time, to face questions. Baroness Mone told the BBC she made an error in publicly denying her links to firm MedPro, which signed a deal to supply personal protection equipment during the pandemic. Conservative MP Miriam Cates is being investigated by Parliament's standards watchdog. The Penistone and Stocksbridge MPs facing claims that she caused significant damage to the reputation of the House. It's unknown what the investigation relates to. She's one of 8 MPs currently being investigated by the Standards Commissioner. £1.5 billion of funding is being put into government grant schemes to help keep households warm. It's part of the £6 billion energy efficiency package announced during last year's autumn statement. The funding covers a 3-year period from 2025 to 2028. A new £400 million energy efficiency grant will also go to households to fund bigger radiators and better insulation. Owners of XL bullies have 2 weeks to make sure their dogs are legal. From December 31st, they must be muzzled in public, and it'll be illegal to breed, sell or abandon them in England and Wales. Owners have also been told they can ask a vet to put their pets down and claim compensation. A full ban on the breed comes into force on the 1st of February next year, but owners can apply for an exemption to keep their dogs. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2657 and €1.1600 euros. The price of gold is £1,596 and 91 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 at 7,617 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK. Still to come, 2/3 of all adults are now fat, not us two, compared to just half in the mid-90s. Of those, a quarter are obese, and they're costing the NHS a lot. We're going to debate this next. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The time is 10:38 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with...
11, but yes.
Oh, sorry, I always get the timing.
You're just having such a lovely time, aren't you?
Such a lovely time with lovely Ellie. It is 11:38 at Britain's Newsroom with me. I'm Andrew Pearce and that's Ellie Costello.
Yes. Now, hospital admissions linked to obesity have doubled in 6 years to more than 3,000 people a day being admitted into hospital. It really does highlight the extent of Britain's weight problem.
Well, we're going to see what can be done about this. Former presenter of Fat Families is Steve Miller, no stranger to this programme. And we're also going to talk to the chairman of the National Obesity Forum, Tam Fry. Let's go to you first, Steve. What do you make of this? You're a bit of a fattist, aren't you?
Well, I'm not a fattist. I mean, people accuse me often of fat shaming. I actually think I'm a lifesaver, not a fat shamer. But what we've done in this country, of course, is developed. We've developed chubster culture, where it's kind of cool now to be a jelly-bellied jumbo. To be quite honest with you, we, on the one hand, say to everybody it's really important to manage your health and manage your weight. And then on the other hand, we have this culture that celebrates fat, that actually says no, 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 it's wonderful. We even have fat pride, where people get together and they love their curves, which actually means love your fat. This is our biggest problem. What we love to do, of course, in the UK is come up with lots of excuses. We like to blame the government. We like to blame the food manufacturers, when in fact, what we should be doing is pointing the finger at ourselves.
Tam Fry, are we celebrating our fatness?
No, I hope not. I think that Mr. Miller is absolutely wrong. We have got a government that has, or successive governments since the year 2000, that have done absolutely nothing for obesity, and therefore we have the problem we have because of the government's own indolence. It was told in 2007 that to blame people themselves of having no responsibility on what they eat is totally wrong. They've got to eat, and the food which is available is less than healthy. I welcome very much Victoria Atkins' resolve to introduce healthy living, but she's going to have a real problem because she's married to a sugar tycoon, and sugar is the greatest ill for obesity. And I find it very difficult to understand how the government is going to take on obesity when the health minister herself recuses herself from the argument.
But Tam, a bit of nanny state coming in from you here. Shouldn't people take some responsibility themselves for what they eat? They don't have to eat processed food. They could buy some vegetables, which are quite cheap, and if they don't know how to cook them, look it up on the internet, because you don't even have to buy a cookery book anymore.
I think that's a very simplistic view of life. We have millions of families who don't know how to cook because they were never taught to cook in schools. And it is also true to say that buying vegetables is more expensive, and in this cost of living crisis, the people will go for the cheapest option because they've got to feed themselves somehow.
Steve, what do you make of that then? Is it a simplistic view of life to go to the shop and buy vegetables instead of a burger?
Well, I mean, Tam's been blaming the government for quite a few years. I think that's garbage. I think the reality is when you look deep into it, actually eating healthier can be cheaper. I think the way the government could help actually is to partner with the supermarkets and to proactively promote, cheaper foods, especially in poorer areas. And I get that, and I would support that. But what we're missing here is the responsibility factor. In Japan, for example, they are big on the responsibility factor. Their obesity rate is around 6%. Ours is over 20%. And the reason for that is we've got into this sort of fat pride mentality where it's cool to be fat. And, if you ever talk about how wrong it is to be fat, you're called a fat shamer. Well, I don't agree with that. I think we have to be much more direct and we have to be much more straight talking. And this country, because of its new kind of trendy woke culture, is all too namby-pamby. We're frightened to talk about it and be a bit more direct. Yes, support people, but people need to support themselves as well.
Tam, is it one of the answers in your book, tax unhealthy food? Of course, it's going to be the cheaper food which the poorer families are buying, but is that one of the solutions you would advocate?
Well, one of this particular solution is not to tax the food, but to levy the industry that produces the food. The sugary drinks industry levy in 2018 worked terrifically because the government decided that it was the industry which was the villain. They said, if you take sugar out of your fizzy drinks, we will not levy you, but if you don't, we will levy you greatly. And what the sugar industry did was to get around their boardroom tables and say how stupid that we should pay the government lots of money, we'll take sugar out of our drinks. And they've taken an enormous amount of sugar, and that is already having beneficial effects. I'd like to just reply to Mr. Miller, if I may. He's raised the issue of Japan, and he's absolutely pro-Japan. No problem with their obesity, but what they did in 2008 was to introduce a law. And the law said you will measure your waist every year. And if it doesn't fall within prescribed boundaries, your employer will be fined. What happened? Employers started to have exercise classes in their homes, in their workplaces, and the Japanese measured each other, and they have now 6% as opposed to our 20-odd%, and that is the way to go about it. You need to have intervention from government in order to make people do what is required.
OK, that is the chairman of the National Obesity Forum, Tam Fry, and also the former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Thank you very much for debating that with us this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, they're back. The panel's back. Emma Wolfe and Dawn Newsroom.
You sound so thrilled to have us back.
Always thrilled.
We're back.
Always. We've talked about fat stuff already.
We did, yes. And I think what there was being said was making an awful lot of sense. I think that we are so frightened to have this conversation, aren't we? That's the issue with this.
Yeah. Well, as you said, Steve said he's been accused of fat shaming.
But that instantly you get
and he says, I'm not a fat shamer, I'm a lifesaver. I think that's brilliant.
Very good
I'm
answer.
going to steal it, because I don't think anyone would pretend that being obese or being overweight is a happy place to be. It's not as though anyone is telling anyone off. It's about living a happier and more mobile, more active lifestyle. And that's a good thing. And it is about personal responsibility.
And look, you can
can't just blame the government.
You can blame the government for a lot of things in this country, but
not what you put in your mouth.
Exactly. When did we lose responsibility for our own behaviour?
Quite.
Now blame
Personal
the government
responsibility.
for everything. Personal responsibility.
Well, and I think COVID made that even more of a problem because the dependency culture, hand out money, think for me.
And Andrew, the government were literally telling us how to walk down the street, how to walk around the supermarket.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
And in Wales, they even closed some supermarket aisles down because they didn't think it was appropriate for you to be buying those
Alcohol
sorts of
at one point.
Alcohol at one point.
Yeah, that was disastrous.
Well, do let us know what you make of that story. Do we need to be more straight talking? What do you think the solution is to tackle the obesity crisis? GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, Dawn, you've got a story in The Guardian, it's caught our eye this morning. Teacher guidance on gender. Tell us a bit more.
How long have we been waiting for this, Dawn?
A long time. And we're waiting a lot more. This is a 12-week consultation period that's starting in the spring, so it's not actually...
Another one. Honest to God.
This is teachers will not have to flag pupils who ask about gender, and this can include primary school children.
What?
Schools will be expected to inform parents if children tell staff they want to take steps towards actually physically transitioning, but if you've got a primary school child who wants to be called Steve rather than Sue or Sue rather than Steve, teachers do not have to inform the parents.
But this is guidance, and the trouble is going to be, Dawn, people will say, well, that's only guidance. Why can't they just say, this is what's going to happen? We are the government, we're making a decision.
Because you've got a problem with our Kemi Badenoch is supporting our actually parents being involved, but she isn't willing to take on the equality laws at the moment. So that's why there's another consultation period.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, to more consultation. I just think this is terribly... Who are we talking about here? We're talking about the well-being of children.
Yeah.
I just think all of this is such a horribly confusing and harmful environment to bring children up in, telling them they're in the wrong body. No, let's teach them love, acceptance, difference,
boys are boys, girls are girls.
Boys are boys, girls are girls. You can love who you want, and we love everybody. And none of this stuff about you're in the wrong body. You need to change your name. You need to start dressing differently. What a confusing world for a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old.
As a parent, Emma, how does it make you feel that your little one is growing up in an education system where they could ask questions such as that? Or
they could ask questions.
Be named something else.
He could be going by the name of Lulu, and I'd be calling him Ludo. This is outrageous. Parents have a right to know everything that is going on in their child's little world. You don't know what's happening with your children at school or at nursery.
And how can you help if you don't know as a parent? I mean, that
support them and talk them through it. It's your child. It's not the school's
I think the guidance is saying that parents must be told if the child's gender is going to be changed at school, if they're going to have a different pronoun.
Well, I mean,
that's just guidance.
That's not that clear either.
No.
They have to be informed if the child is physically wanting to transition, but not whether they want to use pronouns or are confused about their gender.
But just the whole idea of a child wanting to transition. A child wanting to transition. You're a child.
A child doesn't do that. This nonsense is coming from adults. It's coming from schools. It's coming from this incredibly ludicrous woke agenda. Children don't say that. Children don't come up with this idea of transitioning.
No.
It's very trendy. It is very trendy, and it's like.
Will it go out of fashion?
Yes, it will. Of course it will.
So,
Look, if a child has any kind of emotional issues, the teacher and the parents need to get together and talk to the child about it. That's as far as it goes.
Emma, you've got a story in the Telegraph for us. The BBC are in trouble with the Tories after branding the Sunak-Maloney Festival a far-right rally.
Yeah, so this was the 4-day conference with Giorgia Meloni, her Brothers of Italy party, which
she's
Sunak
the Prime
attended,
Minister.
Which, Sunak attended, and the BBC are now caught up in yet another impartiality row, having failed to call Hamas terrorists.
Yeah, but they still aren't.
They were cheerfully yesterday calling this a far-right conference. So anything that is not, incredibly kind of in their agenda is now called far-right. Tory MPs are saying it's quite remarkable that the BBC finds it appropriate to refer to our allies, prominent leaders and their political parties as far-right simply for being conservative-minded.
Yeah, and for also saying there's a problem with immigration.
Yeah,
and there is a huge problem with immigration.
And that's what Sunak was saying. He was talking about... It was a little bit Enoch Powell. He was talking about being overwhelmed and the flood of migrants and stuff.
Well, but parts of Europe, much more than us, are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And Italy's part of it.
Many people agreed with him. That's the problem.
Well,
the BBC...
The rhetoric was very Suella Braverman, wasn't it? So... But the question I want to ask you, Andrew,
is
very rivers of blood.
Will the rhetoric that Rishi Sunak used actually win over that red wall that is going to probably decide in the next election?
Well, it will help, but it will help more if they stop the boats, and it will help more if they cut legal migration from 745,000 a year. In 2010, it was 250,000.
Don't worry.
Dear old David Cameron, our foreign secretary, said it'd be cut to the low tens of thousands.
Grant Shapps has a plan.
Oh.
Britain will smash the small boats. Grant
We've seen
Shapps,
that one before.
Another day, another broken promise. He's got a new plan, and he's going to smash the small boats. It's all fine, everybody.
That's the defence secretary. What it's got to do with him anyway?
They're just empty words. I mean, it doesn't actually explain how he's going to do it.
No, he doesn't. No, he's going to tackle the criminal gangs.
But that's also Labour's Labour's policy too.
Yeah.
They're going to cut to grips with the criminal gangs.
But Andrew, there's no problem.
No. Yeah.
We've got a story here, Dawn, in the Daily Mirror, front page of the Daily Mirror, actually. Reindeer for slaughter. This is a British firm.
Terrible.
Sparked fury by selling
well, they're going to chop off his red nose.
Hunts.
Yeah, who killed
this
Bambi?
Is too awful.
Poor old Rudolph. This is a British firm. They are organising hunting trips to Norway.
Stop it.
And it costs a lot of money, and this is you can go out there next summer. Now,
look, we've got if you're listening on the radio, we've got a nice reindeer on the screen with their big what do they call them?
It's basically trophy hunting, and it is appalling, and it is shocking, and it is awful, and it should not be happening. However, people who live in the countryside, certainly in the wilds of Scotland, will say that animals have to be culled as well, in particular the deer population. So there is a necessity for these populations to be controlled.
But should we be glamorising it?
No. We should be turned into a hunting trip.
Trophy hunting is for enjoyment and pleasure. It's not part of conservation, is it?
It's completely appalling.
Yeah.
But I don't know with this particular story whether this is the case in Norway that these deers need to be culled.
Do we need to have to sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer to them? You could.
I can't sing to save my life.
Yeah, that's true.
I was singing
that this morning.
Were you? What, to your son?
Yes.
Ah.
Spent all breakfast singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and then we went into a rousing rendition of Jingle Bells, and I'm sick of all these Christmas songs already.
But you've got another week to go now.
Can you name the reindeer, apart from Rudolph?
No.
They've got some lovely names, haven't they?
Yeah. Dancer,
Prancer,
Vixen.
Would you be a prancer or a dancer? I think I'd be a dancer.
No, you'd be a prancer.
You'd be a prancer.
I knew you would say that. I walked into that.
Was there a reindeer called Doris? I'd be the Doris.
Is your little one really excited for Christmas?
Really excited about Christmas, yeah. It's the first
Isn't it lovely through a child's eyes?
It's the first year that they start to understand, because when they're 1 and 2, they don't really get it.
Have you got a chimney?
No, we don't have a chimney. I got a small tree this year, which I haven't done for decades, so I have given in to the tree thing.
Explain that Santa's going to get in and leave the presents.
This is the weird thing, because he's got all these presents he wants, so I just keep saying, if you're a good boy, Santa will bring that. If you're a good boy, Santa will bring that. So it's just kind of bribery, and then I'm having to furiously order them on Amazon. And
of course.
But keeping Santa's very busy. Not coming down the chimney. You've got a chimney.
Well, he refused breakfast this morning, so I said Santa had left him a mince pie, and he ate that instead.
Well, Dawn and Emma, it's been wonderful to see you this morning.
Always
Thank you very much for your company.
That's a lovely festive top.
Yes, very festive.
Sequins.
Yeah. Matching our tree with all the sequins. We love it. Well, that's it from us this morning. It's been lovely. Thank you for having me.
It's been really nice, Ellie. Lovely.
We're with you all week.
We're here all week together, so that's good. Now, up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily, and we'll see you tomorrow. Is it Tom?
Except today it is not Tom and Emily, it is Ben, Leo and Emily. Fresh from the jungle, Ben will be with me for the next few days while Tom takes a break. What have we got coming up?
Yeah, great to be back. A bit cold though, Emily. A bit of a change from the Gold Coast. Massive show today. Rwanda. Forget the court. It's grounded because the government can't find airlines to take migrants on deportation flights. Is this the end of the controversial Rwanda scheme?
Yes, and also we'll be looking to Israel because Ben Wallace, our Defence Secretary, had some strong words against Israeli actions. We'll let you know in just a moment. First, the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Cloudy for most of us today and breezy with that as well. Outbreaks of rain for some, but not for all. We've got a weather front moving south. Ahead of that front, a strong west to southwesterly breeze, bringing a lot of cloud in from the Atlantic and outbreaks of rain for parts of Wales. Northwest England as well, that rain persistent and at times heavy over the hills. Otherwise, for the south and southeast of England, largely dry with a lot of cloud, some low cloud covering the hills. But brighter skies are expected in the far north of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, albeit with a few showers and a gusty wind. It's mild across the board, 12 to 13 Celsius in the south. But into the evening, a front sinks south across Scotland, bringing some heavy rain for a time and some gusty winds with it. That sinks into England and Wales, where the rain does turn heavier and more widespread through the night. So a wet start to the day on Tuesday across the southern half of the UK. However, it will be a mild start at 10 or 11 Celsius. Colder conditions, a touch of frost in the far north with some showers moving in from the northwest, and these showers will be falling as snow over the Scottish mountains because this is colder air that's moving in from the northwest. Whilst after the wet start in the south, the rain clears and brighter skies follow, albeit with lower temperatures, highs of 9 or 10 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.